The format for this meeting is an interview with an alcoholic, the hot seat, inside the alcoholic studio. A speaker will be asked a series of questions that range from their personal story, the steps, relationship with God, and carrying the message. There are no right answers, just a fun and interesting way to share the speaker's personal insight. Our speaker for tonight is Tim.
Greetings.
Timekeeper, please allow 90 seconds per question. The meeting may run slightly longer. Members, please feel free to leave if needed. Speaker, please say done when you have finished your answers, or please say pass on questions you would prefer to skip. Are you ready?
I'm ready, man. Let's do this.
Let's begin. Please generally describe, in your own words, our basic text, the book Alcoholics Anonymous.
So for me, Alcoholics Anonymous was a set of explanations about what was going on with me that I really had no idea about. You know, it starts in the doctor's opinion and talks about the way that I'm maladjusted to life. I'm in full flight from reality and I'm outright mental defective. And then it goes on for me to describe a series of actions that I'm going to take that are going to make me not suffer from this malady as often. It doesn't make it go away, but for me, you know, I mean, it talks about in our literature, the steps are spiritual in nature, and if practice is a way of life, can expel the urge to drink, and that's been true for me.
Are you an alcoholic? And if so, what personally makes you an alcoholic?
I'm super, super alcoholic in every single thing that I do. What makes me an alcoholic for this room is what it talks about in the doctor's opinion. In the doctor's opinion, it says I had the phenomenon of craving that doesn't exist in your average temperate drinker. If that's true for me, then I don't really need to read any of the other things. And that was true for me. I had this phenomenon of craving that apparently doesn't exist for people who like one glass of wine. It manifests itself in a bunch of other strange ways in my life. Like, you know, I have about $350 worth of tea at home right now. That's wacky, and you know, it's that thing I'm obsessing on. So my alcoholism hasn't gone anywhere, but it's found some ways that are not harmless for me to obsess on.
What does the concept of anonymity mean to you?
The concept of anonymity, when I got here, meant don't tell anybody who I am. That it's a free place for me to come and talk about my alcoholism and not worry about you talking about it outside of a meeting. We've all gone to the store and you're with some people who aren't from the program perhaps, and you see somebody who is, and you're like, God, how are they going to address me? And so I'm really cognizant in those situations to make sure that I don't blow their anonymity. The longer I stay around here, it really has a lot more to do with humility and ego deflation. Because if I don't take credit for things, then my ego doesn't get puffed up. And if my ego doesn't get puffed up, I'm in a lot better place spiritually.
Please give us a brief sketch of your drinking career up to the time you quit.
Brief sketch. Boy, we don't have enough time for that. Early on, I tried lots of forms of, like what I like to call non-conference approved substances. And the reason that's important is because I thought if I didn't drink, then I was an alcoholic. And then when all that was left was alcohol, I could match up how I always drank. And I always drink until it's gone or I pass out. That's my style of drinking. I like waking up in the hedges. My kids like to put a blanket on me because they're good kids. You know, I go to the bathroom places you're not supposed to go to the bathroom at, like the shoe closet, things like that. I just don't have an off button. That's what my alcoholism looks like. There's just zero chance of me taking a drink and telling you what's going to happen next. It alludes to that in the book. You know, if when you know you want to, you can't stop, or when drinking you can't control the amount you take, then you're probably alcoholic, and that's so true for me. That's been true since I was 12. You know, I was the kid throwing up with everybody in the living room. Nobody else threw up. I don't know why this 12-year-old had to throw up, but such is life. Yeah.
Alcoholism is described in the book as a fatal illness. What does that mean to you?
it's no different than having heart disease or cancer or something like that. My alcoholism absolutely has to be treated. And it can be treated a couple of ways. I can treat it with the drink. I can treat it with a non-conference approved substance. I can treat it with a her. I can treat it with a goal. I can treat it with money. I can treat it with women. Some people treat it with suicide. If I leave it untreated long enough, I have to do something, and sometimes that have to is suicidal thoughts or actions. And this disease is absolutely fatal. I've been around here long enough to see enough people that go, I really don't want to drink anymore, but I also don't want to breathe anymore. And that's tough. If I stay around here long enough, I'm going to see some of that. And it's heartbreaking. And you never know who it's going to be. They could drive a nice car and be good looking as far as societal norms are considered, and inside they're just dying. And I understand how that feels to be stone cold sober and just dying inside.
What are the conditions of your mind and body that accompany your alcoholism?
It talks about it. Step 2. It's insanity. And that we're not talking about like I need to take some lithium or some Prozac kind of insanity. We're talking about the root word of sanity, which means unhealthy thinking. And all of my thinking was unhealthy. And today, untreated, my thinking can also be unhealthy. Where I think that this situation or some upcoming event, if I get everything right, everything's going to be okay. That's crazy. The reality is everything's okay right now, if I believe that. So that to me is that insanity is in simplest terms, thinking I'm sober and a drink's going to make things better. That's pretty crazy too. That's just the diabolical nature of my disease. Yeah.
In your understanding, what is the role of a sponsor? Do you have a sponsor, and how often are you in contact?
I have a sponsor. We're in contact at least on a weekly basis. And I have been taught that the role of my sponsor is to walk me through the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous so that I can have a spiritual experience or a spiritual awakening, however you'd like to put it. That my sponsor, through working the steps and what was taught to him, put my hand in the hand of God. And that was his job. The rest of it's just gravy, the fact that we're friends and things like that. Because he'll tell me some really difficult things I don't want to hear about myself. But really, he gave me a mechanism for getting in touch with God.
How have your sponsorship needs changed from early sobriety until now?
I don't know that my sponsorship needs have changed. My physical sponsor that I go see put me in the hands of my real sponsor, who's God. That's the true sponsorship. I have a relationship with the power greater than myself. However you want to chop that up, it doesn't matter if your God is good orderly direction or doing the next right thing or any of that stuff. But my needs haven't changed. It's just where I go to is different most of the time. And then when I'm stuck, I come back to Bill and I say, "Hey, Bill, I'm having this problem," and he says something super stupid like, "Let's write that on paper. Let's do a 5th step." Like junk I don't want to hear. But nothing's changed about that necessity to be just to the bone honest with somebody. Just absolutely as honest as I can be. What's changed is how honest I can be. The need hasn't changed at all.
Have you completed the 12 steps? And if so, what is your suggested time frame for completing the steps of AA?
Completed, that's a funny concept because it says it's going to be a lifelong process. So have I completed the steps? No. Have I worked 1 through 12? Yeah, often. And my suggestion is the same thing that was suggested to me: when you get enough pain to want to live differently, then do the steps. If somebody has cancer, they don't go, "I'm going to wait till I feel better and then I'm going to do some chemo." They get some chemo and they start to feel better. So if I'm in a lot of pain, then the answer is doing the steps right now. I did them super fast. Had completed my steps the first time in 90 days, and then I was ready to start helping other people work their way through the steps. And that's the beauty of it, is because you get through them that first time, and then you get to go through them with somebody again. So I mean, I've worked the steps so many times. Sometimes it's only 1, 2, 3, because that's as long as that guy cares to stay around. I've done a lot of 1, 2, 3 shuffle, but the reality is I got real good at 1, 2, 3.
In your own words, please describe steps 1, 2, and 3.
The simplest is I can't, he can, I think I'll let him. That's the simplest thing around here. One is I can't control my emotional nature, and I don't like the way that feels, rather than I drink too much, and when I drink too much, I do stupid things. That's what I thought when I got here. Step 1 defines the problem, step 2 identifies a solution, and step 3 is the first application of that solution, where I go to get in touch with the power greater than myself. It says at the end of that step, we thought well before taking this step, making sure that we were at last ready to abandon ourselves utterly to Him, because it's that abandonment where it starts to happen. And if I can't do 4, it's because I didn't do 1, 2, 3 well enough. It's not because 4 was too hard. It's because I didn't do 1, 2, 3.
What does your unmanageability and self-will look like?
Oh, man, my unmanageability and self-will, simplest terms, just with food, getting to a point where the doctor's like, why don't we do gastric bypass? And I'm like, well, why don't we not? But that's unmanageability. That's taking an outward stimuli and trying to fix what's going on inside of me. That's what my unmanageability looks like, where I continue to think that outward stimuli is going to make what's going on inside of me okay. I mean, that's at its root. That's the root of every ism. No matter what your ism is and what 12 steps you're applying to it, is I think that something outside of me is going to make inside of me okay.
What is your concept of a power greater than yourself, and how are you turning your will and your life over to it?
Man, my concept. I don't know that I have a concrete concept. I have an unshakable belief that a power greater than myself has entered my life and is convinced to do things for me that are indeed miraculous. I mean, what that concept looks like, I'm not religious in nature. Spiritual might be a stretch. I'm not very spiritual if I'm on US 50 in the morning. But I have an unshakable belief. Somewhere I was reading some outside literature by a gentleman named Brother Lawrence. It's called Practicing the Presence of God. And the first half of it is very biblical and in my estimation, sort of preachy. And I was thinking, why do I keep coming to this Thursday meeting and reading this rag? And then in the second half of the book, he talks about practicing the presence of God, where he was laughing at these other monks who are going to be so scrupulous at the pulpit or in the chapel to talk to God, when he was doing that same thing, scrubbing a pot. He said, I can be in contact with God all the time. Why would I worry about doing it just inside of those walls? And that was such a profound moment for me. That it really changed the relationship I have with the power greater than myself. What it is, it doesn't matter. If I can explain it to you, it's not a big enough God to handle my problems. If I can sit here and go, it's this, that, and this, I'm probably going to get inebriated pretty fast.
Please briefly describe your experience with steps 4 and 5.
4 and 5, I think, are the easiest of the steps. Especially 4. 4 doesn't really require a whole lot of anything. 4 just requires me to put down on paper all the things that make me angry, resentful, fearful, the ways I've tried to use women to treat my alcoholism or relationships of other kinds, I suppose, depending on the way you're set up. It's real easy, what I found over time is I get a hell of a lot more truthful the further along I go. That first 5 is kind of scary. You know, you're going to go over to somebody's place and tell them some things about yourself that you don't want to tell them. But it wasn't anything that people didn't know. There wasn't a single thing on that 5th step that I shared that somebody didn't know. What was different this time was that one person knew all of it. And that was the only thing that was different, was one person knew all of it and laughed and said, "Man, you're effed up, Tim." You know? So, I mean, you know, 4 and 5 are really, that's the meat and potatoes of the program. Because in 4 and 5, I can identify those things that are blocking me from God and take action on them in 6 and 7. But without doing a thorough 4 and 5 here and there, I've done a bunch of them, it blocks me from God.
What does the exact nature of our wrongs mean to you?
The exact nature of our wrongs. At first, it was really, really superficial. And the exact nature of my wrongs, I think, changes over time. At first, the exact nature of my wrongs was all that baggage I carried with me all those years. Different stuff. Some of it wasn't my fault. My fault was that I kept carrying it. You know, could you imagine having a rock you don't like, but still keeping it in your backpack and carrying it around? That's what I was doing. I had this anger and this resentment towards somebody, and I would continue to carry that with me, although it served no purpose. That was an exact nature of my wrong. Sometimes it's a lack of honesty. Usually, the exact nature of my wrongs, not usually, nearly 100% of the time is fear-based. You know, I have a fear that I'm not going to get what I want. I'm going to lose something I already have, or you're going to find out something about me that you don't know and you're not going to like me.
Please briefly describe your experience with steps 6 and 7.
Oh, 6 and 7, man, they're a setup. There's no other way to describe it, especially step 6. Step 6, it says in there in the 12 and 12 that this is the step that separates the men from the boys. And I'm sure it separates the women from the girls as well. Because in that I'm going to be required, all those things that I thought about on my own and wrote down and then shared with another individual, I'm actually going to start to try to do something about in 6. And then in 7, I get to say, you know, I now, you know, roughly paraphrase it, that I get to give to God all of me, good and bad, that He take away from me every single defect of character that blocks me from my usefulness to God and to others. And it's not until I do those thoroughly that I start to get some relief. You know, I can do 1 through 5 all day long. If I don't do 6 and 7, I don't get any relief. You know, and I don't get the freedom that comes in 8 and 9.
What are some of your character defects, and are they being removed?
I don't think I have a single defect of character that's ever been removed. What I do have is a shelf, and the longer I stay around and the more I stay in touch with God, the less time I take them old books off the shelf and read them. The less time I think that me trying to manage and manipulate life to suit myself is going to bring joy and satisfaction. The character defects really, for me, come down to honesty, integrity, open-mindedness, you know, because if I'm closed-minded to something that somebody's telling me that's good for me, then that's a problem, you know. So, I mean, that's kind of it in a nutshell. The defects of character, I mean, if you need to, they can be biblical, or they can be, you know, Eastern-facing type stuff, you know, where you're trying to go a Buddhist route. That's, I guess, the beauty of it is that no matter what your point of view is as far as a moral compass goes, they don't clash.
Please briefly describe steps 8 and 9.
They seem like they go together, but they don't. In step 8, I really have to have that willingness that it talks about to go out and actually make an amends. And so many times people talk about, I went and told them I was sorry, and that's not what it says. It says that I'm going to make amends, and if you look up amends in the dictionary, amends means to change or alter. So in steps 8 and 9, I'm going to change and alter my behavior with somebody that there's a pretty good chance I don't like them or they don't like me. But I'm going to go there anyway and accept responsibility for my actions and see what I can't do to set that right with them. And that's huge because I didn't set right anything. Before I got here, if we had a disagreement and it had come to that point where it was starting to boil over, I just didn't talk to you anymore. I wasn't accepting responsibility for anything. That was your fault. If you hadn't wronged me, if you hadn't made me act that way, if you hadn't acted that way, I wouldn't have had to yell at you. If you hadn't acted that way, I wouldn't have needed to punch you in the face. Really, you overstepped your bounds, and when you say something like that to me, you should know you're going to get punched in the face. And what a crazy way to live your life. It's insane, So that's part of an answer to one of your earlier questions, I think.
How about 9?
9 is that actual physical act of going out there and accepting responsibility for past poor behavior. I treated you in a way that was inappropriate. What can I do to make that up to you? Sometimes it's giving them their $20 back. Not saying I'm sorry I ripped you off. That's, I've had somebody come to me, I'm sorry I ripped you off. And I'm thinking, well, wait a minute, I've read the book. Where's my $20 at? I never got my $20. But, and in a therapeutic sort of way for myself, because I'm selfish and self-centered, I get a big fat scoop of humble pie. And humble pie tastes terrible. And having eaten a slice of humble pie, I don't want any more. And therefore, I'm going to try not to act that way again, because if I'm trying to walk the spiritual life, then I got to go back and accept responsibility for my actions like that with somebody else. And that's where the magic of the promises comes in. The promises say after I do my 9th step amends, or during that process, I will intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle me. I'm all in. I don't care about the rest, because everything baffled me when I got to Alcoholics Anonymous. Everything. I don't know how to life. I don't know how to interact with other people in a way that's quote unquote normal. I see, touch, taste, feel, experience life differently. What's that? But this promises me that if I do this 9th step, that I'll intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle me. I'm in, man. I'm in. And I had one of those situations. I wasn't baffled anymore. I had my boss who was really, for lack of a better term, just psychotic. And that intuitive action was to just sit there over and over and go, Tim, just keep your mouth shut. Tim, just keep your mouth shut. Tim, just keep your mouth shut. Nothing you're going to say right now is going to be helpful to your situation. Just be quiet. She quit. I didn't. So, yeah.
Why is it important for you to straighten out your past?
I don't know that I necessarily straightened out my past. I've come to terms with it. I've come to understand that in a lot of those situations, I did the best I could do with the information that I possessed. I did the best that I could do, as good as a crazy person can do in survival mode. I did the best I could to meet my needs because I thought that was what was going to make everything okay. The rest of it, I'm not sure,
When you were actively drinking, did you drink whiskey in your milk?
I never ever drank whiskey and milk because I'm not really a whiskey drinker. And alcohol mixed with milk, unless it's Kahlua, is disgusting. But so is drinking Taka vodka straight, warm, out of a PET bottle. And it's even more disgusting when you've had it sitting underneath the seat of your car and you live where it gets 105 degrees in the summer. It's so I've drank 135 degree cheap vodka on my lunch break. That was disgusting. But whiskey and milk, no, can't do it.
Please briefly describe your experience with steps 10 and 11.
Step 10, I remember the first time I did step 10 in the moment. I was at work and I was being a jerk to somebody. And I was walking back to my desk and it was like somebody hit me with a shovel. And I walked back over and I turned around, and just like I had talked to that person in front of everybody, I went back to them and I said, you know what, I'm sorry, I shouldn't talk to you like that. And it was such a profound moment for me. It was that moment where I said, holy smokes, I think these 12 steps I might not need to drink. Like for an extended period of time. I wasn't quite sold on forever yet, but I was sold on maybe this week I'm not going to need to drink. And it set up something that I try to teach my children and the guys that I sponsor also. It's not good enough to promptly admit that you're wrong to somebody in private when you were demeaning to them in front of everybody. That's cheaping out. And if I am rude and disrespectful to you in front of a group of people, I need to make that amends promptly to you in front of that group of people, or as similar as I can get. Hey, the way that I treated you yesterday was inappropriate, and I'll try not to do that again. Was profound for me. Step 11 is really, unbeknownst to me, I spend more time there now than I do in any other step. Because I'm always trying to maintain that contact with the power greater than myself. And some days, my sponsor has really helped me out with this. Some days, the very, very, very best that I can hope for is 20 or 30% of my day I'm trying to get in touch with this power greater than myself. But in that slot, that 20 or 30% of the time, I'm giving it 100% of my effort. Just like I drank. I'm giving 100% of my effort, when I don't know what to do, or, some of those other kind of weird situations that arise. I had a super, super, super difficult employee, and every natural instinct of me is a prayer for, man, I hope he gets his. But what step 11 taught me was, God, if you could do whatever this man needs to be happy and whole like I want in my life. I don't know if he got to be happy and whole, but I did.
What does meditation mean to you, and how do you practice it?
Meditation, for me, is just a simple assessment of here's where I'm at, and here's where I'd like to be, and not worrying about how I get there. That's that kind of, God, I'm here in this place, and I really want to be over here, and if you could help me get there, I'd appreciate it. There's this notion that in order to meditate, I have to be quiet. If that's true, then in my 9 years, 5 months, and 20-something days, I've never once meditated. Because I can only I get brief bursts of silence up between my ears, maybe 15, 20, 30, 40 seconds, somewhere in there. It's really, really wonderful for my head to be quiet that long. So if it had to be this total Zen-like silence or solitude, I haven't done that yet. But like it talks about in step 11 and the 12 and 12, where I look at where I'm at and where I want to be and don't worry about how it is I get there, I do that every day, all the time. I just put my faith in a power greater than myself.
Please briefly describe step 12.
There's no, I don't think you can describe it briefly, but I'll do my best. Really, it's a 3-part having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, not a result, the result. It's the entire point that I work steps 1 through 11 is to have this experience, this awakening, this shift in things that I used to think were important that aren't important anymore. And then I have to carry this message to other alcoholics, which the book says nothing so much so ensure immunity from that next drink as intensive work with other alcoholics. I've gotten more out of working the steps with another guy than I did that initial time out of working them with my sponsor. And by more, I don't mean to diminish the amazing experience I had that first journey through with a sponsor. But it's very different listening to somebody tell you these are the things that you need to do. And it's very different that now I'm telling somebody else these are the things you need to do, because then comes into play that last part of the 12 step is to practice these principles in all my affairs. So if I'm telling some guy he needs to make 3 meetings, I probably need to make 3 meetings, right? If I'm telling this person I need to be rigorously honest, then I probably should model rigorous honesty, right? Eyeball to eyeball Alcoholics Anonymous is what expels that urge to drink in me. And if I don't do eyeball to eyeball Alcoholics Anonymous, I'm going to have my own fifth. And it's not going to be in writing. It's going to be a liquid form, and I don't want to do those kind of fifths anymore. I want a 5th step, not a fifth of vodka.
Can you share with us a spiritual experience you have had as the result of these steps?
For sure. I remember I'm about 9 months sober. I'm in court for sole custody of the children. And I really, really despise the person that I'm going there with. They have an attorney. I don't. I'm sweating bullets. I'm full of fear. I don't know what to do. And I've got Chuck C's book, A New Pair of Glasses, in my hand. And I can't really read a paragraph at a time because my head is too much like potato salad. And I managed to get that one part into my head that he talks about, that the wonderful fact was that God was always with him. And in that moment, I experienced a sense of calm that literally I could feel start in my hair follicles on my head and end in the hair follicles on my toes. And just stop sweating and stop worrying about it and going, God is going to figure this out, Tim, and you don't have to. And experience such a sense of peace and calm that to that point in my life, I hadn't experienced something like that in such a stressful situation, and I couldn't dismiss it. And I couldn't dismiss it today. And those people who've walked a spiritual journey understand, and those people who haven't have a million ways to poke holes in it, but yet it still floats for me.
What is the message of AA, and why is it important to carry this message?
The message of Alcoholics Anonymous is that no matter what circumstance you come from, no matter who you are, no matter where you are, no matter what you do or don't do, if I apply these principles in my life, I don't got to drink today. I don't have to drink today. And that's powerful. There's a whole bunch of other stuff. The book says that we could use this in many other facets of our life. But the reality is if I do what it says, rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. If I do that, I don't have to drink today. And I didn't have a choice when I got here. It wasn't like, oh, I think I won't drink today. If I didn't drink before I got to Alcoholics Anonymous, it was because I was incarcerated, I was in a whole heap of trouble and I was talking to a government agency, or I was so sick from drinking or from the flu that the thought of having a drink was repulsive. And mind you, in the 7.5 years where I was trying to get sober, there were only 6 or 9 days where a thought of a drink was so repulsive. You can multiply 7 by 365, and that'll give you a pretty good idea. I mean, virtually never. Today I don't have to drink.
What are some of the principles you are practicing in your affairs today?
Well, if I'm doing it right, there are 36 principles in the steps, the traditions, and the concepts that I practice in my life. The ones in the concepts maybe are a little bit more difficult to dice up at first. I use those a lot as somebody with 14 direct reports. I flip it on its head like the triangle in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I think that I support them, they don't support me. What can I do to make their day easier is the mantra that I carry with me everywhere that I go. Am I being honest? I have children who would love me to buy a jailbroken Fire Stick. And I just tell them, is that honest? And they say, well, no, but you can do it. Mom has one. Well, if Mom has one, that's a pretty good reason why I wouldn't like to have one. But the reality is if that I want something today, I'm going to pay for it. I don't download movies that aren't mine. I don't download music that's not mine. If I want a song, it's $1 on iTunes. And if I don't have $1, then I don't need a song. I try to be honest with people. I try to show up when I say I'm going to be there. If I'm not going to be there, I try to let them know. And I don't try not to be there. If I'm not going to be there, this reason needs to be legitimate. I can't just not show up because I suddenly found something better to do. That's rude. That's disrespectful. So I try to treat people like I would like to be treated. And unfortunately, they probably don't like that a whole lot because what really floats my boat is brutal honesty. And some people are just unprepared for that. They're just like, whoa, dude. Like I work with this person at work and I can't tell them your back wouldn't hurt so much if you weren't so fat. But I can say, hey, you know what? I got to go to work today even though my back hurts because I'm fat because of my own actions. So I can't call in sick because I ate too much food and my back hurts. It's just that layer of brutal honesty. And like I said, some people are unprepared for that.
Why is it important to put the welfare of others ahead of my own?
I don't know that that's a true statement because if I put the welfares of others at the forefront of my mind, I'll get taken care of. Never once have I made sure that somebody else was okay and somehow lost out in the process. It just doesn't happen that way. That's not the kind of God I have. I don't have to worry about those things. Being a decent human being is not going to negatively impact my life. And if I think it does, my ego's out of whack. I have it totally mixed up. Lighting somebody else's candle doesn't make my candle less bright. Puffing somebody else up doesn't make me small. So to me, the question is really nonsensical because that's not how it works if I'm practicing the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous.
How do you determine or gauge the quality of your sobriety in AA?
Well, if I'm judging the quality of my sobriety is getting judged by an idiot. So I can't really judge the quality of my sobriety so much as I can judge a lack of quality in my sobriety. And I know when I get to that point because I'll start telling you, John, I think I'll have a drink tomorrow. I don't got a drink today, but I think a drink tomorrow sounds really good. And that's a real good warning sign for me that there's something that's drastically out of whack. Good sobriety, man, that's like I said, that's based on the subjective musings of an idiot. Like good or bad, I try to throw away because those are just subjective judgments by me. I thought what got me to Alcoholics Anonymous was a train wreck. I thought I was a disaster. It's the best thing that ever happened in my life. There was no other way that I could get to a point where I thought spirituality was a solution for me than being absolutely and utterly defeated by life and kicked in the mouth. It seems like a terrible spot to be, but if I'm absolutely destroyed, feeling like life just kicked me in the mouth, maybe I'm willing to listen to somebody else. So this quality, people go, oh, I have a good sponsor. What is that? I'm not going to, the book says job, no job, wife, no wife. I can get sober under any circumstances, provided I follow these simple rules. So what does good look like? I don't know that. I know when it's bad. I know when I need to go to a meeting. I know when I need to get busy. And what's funny is the power greater than myself knows me even better than any of those things. The best judgment for me that something's out of whack, I always get a new guy. When I'm really struggling, some guy walks up and goes, I really need a sponsor. And I'm like, shoot, I thought I was doing good, God. And so that's really, I guess, if there was any warning sign for me, is when I'm struggling, I pick up a new guy. And it's been that way the entire time in my sobriety. I picked up a couple guys recently, and I think I'm doing pretty well. So we'll go figure,
Why do you think alcoholics relapse?
I think there's a bunch of reasons. Not everybody in Alcoholics Anonymous is alcoholic, and then you start getting somebody who's not an alcoholic sponsoring other people and talking about, I just need to make good decisions, or meeting makers make it, or 90 and 90. And there's nothing wrong with 90 and 90. There's nothing wrong to making it to a meeting. The reality is, though, it won't treat my alcoholism. And for me, when I couldn't stay sober before, I don't know about anybody else, was I couldn't swallow step 2 and step 3. I had this aversion to anything remotely related to God as a result of abnormal experience in my childhood. I know it intellectually in my head that it's abnormal. I knew it in '02, the first time I got a whiff of the 12 steps. But when I see it there that I have to turn my will and my life over to the care of God, that's weak. I'm not doing that. To me, that's the major stumble. If I made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him, then the rest of what happens is none of my business. I can't fail. And so for me, it all comes back to 3. Of course, I've had to do 1. I've had to believe that I'm powerless and that my life is unmanageable by me. I have to come to believe in a power greater than myself. And then I have to take the action of turning my will and my life over to this God. People say that step 3 is not an action step. I'm calling BS, because if turning my will and my life over to the care of God and meaning it is not an action, then what is? So for me, if I had to really answer it on simplest terms, it's step 3. Making, of course, the assumption that you've done 1 and 2 and believe those. Because I did 1 and 2 and didn't believe them before. And I've said step 3 in my mouth. But nothing happened because 1 and 2 weren't in place. I can live in 1, 2, 3 for a long, long, long time. I've done it. I did it for a whole year. And it's uncomfortable, but I made it through okay.
Are you willing and able to sponsor other members currently?
Every day, all the time. I have a limited amount I will take on, just because I only have a certain amount of time. I didn't get sober in Alcoholics Anonymous to spend all of my time in Alcoholics Anonymous. I have 4 children I love dearly, and they take a significant portion of my time. I wasn't born independently wealthy, so unfortunately I have to punch the clock for 40 hours a week. So that leaves a small amount of time. I'm always willing to show up and be there, unless they're not willing to do so. If they're not willing to do so, I'm going to go home and hang out with my kids and watch Netflix. Pass.
Presently, what is the most important activity in your recovery program?
Most important. All of it. All of it today. Today I have to conduct myself in a manner that's appropriate. So every day, all the time, everything I do is important. Um, the most important. That changes from day to day. Sometimes the most important thing I can do is be loving and kind. Other times, the most important thing I can be doing is set a boundary with somebody who keeps crossing mine. Some days it's uh, sleep until noon. Some days it's getting up at 6 and going to the men's meeting at 7:30. All of the I don't think there's anything I do that's more or less important than anything else. I think what's important is the integrity I try to conduct my life with. I think that's important. Staying in touch with God is super important. But sometimes I got to get in a little bit of pain to get closer to God. That's why I talk about step 6 and step 7 being a setup, is because that pain brings me back to God. And if it doesn't bring me back to God, it's going to bring me back to a drink. And so that relationship with the power greater than myself, I'm talking to God before my feet hit the floor. I just, man, I'm super blessed. Thanks, God. Usually it's not real structured. When I'm in a little bit of pain, it's very structured, and I'm doing that third step in my head a lot. But that contact with God fixes all of the other things. If I stay in contact with God, I don't need to worry about anything, because I gave my will and my life over to God in step 3. So there's nothing left for me to worry about if I'm truly doing this. The only times I notice it is when I'm not. It's like driving down a country road and realizing how beautiful the scenery is, and you're totally in the moment. You're not worried about that guy who pissed you off at work. And then all of a sudden the deer jumps out and you're like, ah! That's like me in life, like all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I like how peaceful that was back there. How do I get that again? And then so I start going through and going, where am I out of whack,
Would you please generally describe the purpose of the 12 traditions of AA?
The 12 traditions of Alcoholics Anonymous, contrary to popular belief, do not keep me from homicide. They are a set of spiritual principles that I can internalize and use in my own life. And just as importantly, they're what keeps Alcoholics Anonymous alive. Without practicing the spiritual principles behind the traditions, Alcoholics Anonymous won't be here all these years later. And if we stop doing it, it'll disappear. And you see it all the time that happen. Meetings close. Meetings close because they're not following the principles that are embodied in the traditions. If I'm not self-supporting, if I haven't drawn a really fine, definitive line between myself and outside entities, if I'm letting people come in and talk about drugs and other stuff, sure, they're part of lots of stories. They're parts of bills. But if I'm going to a meeting and I'm hearing about stuff that doesn't have to do with alcoholism, I'm not going to stay long. I'm not. There's some other stuff for that, and it's one of those really slushy lines oftentimes that people get to. But really, it's what keeps Alcoholics Anonymous alive and well and free for the next person who desperately needs it. That's the purpose. And then if I look at that traditions checklist that you can get anywhere that sells literature or online, it's very easy to internalize those and say, how do I apply these in my own life? Like I need to be fully self-supporting through my own contributions. That's pretty easy. But the rest of them are very similar too.
Can you give us some examples of meeting etiquette?
Some examples of meeting etiquette. Get your coffee before you sit down. At least wait until the speaker is done speaking if you have to leave early. Bring your kids something to eat. Don't leave because your kids are being loud. They're bothering you more than they're bothering me. I had to take my kids to meetings. It was vital that I be there. If somebody's that disturbed about it, then they should probably talk to their sponsor. If your kid is super, super unruly, you should probably exit the meeting for a minute. I've had to leave meetings. Always sign the list. If I don't sign the list, then I'm just stealing my recovery. You never know who might need to hear what you have to say. If they call on you and you really don't have anything to add to the discussion, you can just pass. You don't even have to say I don't have anything to add to the discussion. I'm just here to listen tonight. Pass is perfectly acceptable. Getting with somebody, I always love the people who announce that they've been sober 11 months. It's 1 month, 3 months, 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, a year or more. And that's for a reason. And it doesn't have anything to do with not acknowledging how long they've been sober. It has to do with deflating my own ego. Because I want to tell you I've been sober 3,400 and blah, blah, blah days. And aren't you a great person, Tim? Well, no, you should have been a great person no matter what. But, here we are. So pick a seat, stay in your seat, be quiet, get your coffee before the meeting, bring a couple dollars, put them in the basket. If you can afford a Starbucks, you can afford a $5 for your home group. I should put in a $5 bill at my home group. That's for me because I'm so situated where if I don't, that's phony. And I don't always because I forgot to have cash on me. But if I'm at my home group, I should put $5 in the basket. I don't put $5 in every meeting, but if I'm at my home group, I should put $5 in the basket. That's what my sponsor taught me. He said, Tim, you can afford it. Because I can afford it at the bar, right? Mm-hmm. I'm tipping that bartender super good. Keep him coming. I want to look like a big shot. Well, why don't you want to look like a big shot in AA? It saved my life. And really I don't want people to know how much I put in the basket because I don't want them to think anything differently of me. But, those are just some things. Bring a damn dollar. Bring a quarter. If all you can afford is a quarter, man, more power to you. It's appreciated. But do something, Otherwise, I'm just stealing my recovery.
What role models do you have in sobriety?
Role models in sobriety. There's a whole bunch of them. I have a group of men that care more about whether I live or die than how I feel. And they'll tell me some things I don't want to hear. Those guys are humongous role models for me. I kind of lucked into it, sort of a coincidence, a God shot, however you want to put it. But those men really just incredible. And there's some incredible giants who walked in Alcoholics Anonymous before me. I always say that I stand on the shoulders of giants, and it got me just close enough to God that I could have a relationship with him. Some people like Norm Alpe, some people like Chuck C., some people like Paul, I'll have to think of his name. He's out of Chicago. There were some people in early sobriety where I could close my eyes and tell you what their name is because I've listened to their voice so many times, and I've never seen their face, and a lot of them have passed away already. Chris R. down in Texas, he's bombastic and he's ridiculous, but gosh, he talks about the core of Alcoholics Anonymous. I don't care if your cat just died. I'm dying from alcoholism right now, and I need to talk about how you're not dying from alcoholism. And he's not afraid to say it. And to me, that was huge. I mean, my sponsor is my biggest role model. He's shown me how to walk with integrity no matter what the circumstances and why it's important. And all my friends, I have some great friends in Alcoholics Anonymous, and all those people I choose to surround myself with. If I didn't think highly of them, I wouldn't be with them. I'm not coming up to Pollock Pines or Placerville or wherever it is next with people I don't like. That is not happening.
What advice do you have for newcomers in AA?
What advice do I have? Man, work the steps, get a sponsor, work out of the literature. Remember, not everything you heard in that last spin dry you were in is part of the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. The program of Alcoholics Anonymous is in the book. If it isn't in the book, it's not necessarily a bad idea, but it is suspect. And the program is in the book, and it's still super cheap. It's amazing all these years later where it's only like, I think it started out, the book was about $4-ish, and I think it's like $10 today. I mean, that was like 1935, 1939, whenever the book came out. Get a book, work the steps with another alcoholic. Don't work them in your head by yourself from the back of the room. That doesn't work. You cannot get sober through your crotch. That doesn't work. Leave her alone. You don't have anything to offer her. She deserves to have recovery too. You know, she deserves to come to a meeting and not get hit on by three of skeezy dudes. You know, let her be. You know, that's why there's not a bunch of women at regular mixed meetings, because a bunch of you guys have made her feel uncomfortable. Don't do that. If she likes you, she'll let you know. You won't be confused. Leave her alone. You know, let them have their recovery too. You know, they shouldn't have to come to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous and fend off guys. You know, it shouldn't happen. And those girls shouldn't prey on those young 30-day wonders either. You know, we've seen a little of that here and there. But man, you know, work the steps. Get a sponsor. Do it fast. Don't wait till you feel better to do it. Your life's not going to get better because you make better decisions. It says that in there. You know, that I, you know, was under the delusion that I could wrest satisfaction and happiness out of this world if only I managed well. Delusion, you know. So work the steps. Get a sponsor. Do it fast. You can do them again. It's not a one-time only type of deal. So enjoy.
What advice do you have for old timers in AA?
Old timers in AA, you get the same vote I get. That's one. Your opinion is no more valid than anybody else here. When it relates to staying sober, maybe yours has got a little, maybe more like 1.5, but that's only as it relates to applying the 12 steps in your life. It's not what you think. You know, I don't care what you think. I really don't, you know, because I've seen the most spiritual person in the room, the person who is most on fire in Alcoholics Anonymous, often have much less time than other people. My sponsor always jokes, and he says, you know what you call an old timer when they're at home by themselves? A newcomer. He said, that's where I come up with all my best plans. You know, sometimes the alcoholic who still suffers has a bunch of time, and they don't want to say it, you know, because I'm going to cross into double digits this year if I keep playing my cards right and doing what I'm supposed to do. So naturally, I think to myself, I should know some stuff. A bunch of stuff, and I don't. You know, I don't really know a whole lot of anything. I think that, you know, just they have one vote. They do have some knowledge about putting a bunch of days together, and I should pay attention to that whether I like them or not. Sometimes the only thing I learn from an old timer is I don't want my sobriety to look like that, and that's okay. What's not okay is for me to tell them that. I could just keep it to myself. They really don't need to know.
Last question.
All right, bring it.
Can you please describe what this experience was like?
A lot of fun. I mean, of course, you know, you guys are here, so it could have been a terrible time, and I would still have enjoyed myself. But it's interesting to get to look at a lot of those kind of base level questions we have, and how much my answer would be different if I was doing this 5 or 6 years ago, or last week, or, you know, 9 years ago. Would have been drastically different. You know, I would have been able to tell you 9 years ago at this time I was about 5 months sober. I would have been able to tell you why you should work the steps, what each step did for you, and how it was going to change if you continue to work them so diligently. And now I'm not so sure. Because at first I had to know how it worked, because I thought then I would be able to control it, and I would be able to control my sobriety like I like to try to control everything else. I was doing a piss poor job of it, mind you, but you know, these questions really get you to think about what it is that's important, what it is about my sobriety that's important. Absolute honesty in everything that I do. You know, they could say, I didn't like what Tim said, I didn't like how Tim acted. Those are true statements that get made all the time. But they'll never say that what Tim said wasn't true, or what Tim said wasn't what he believed to be true, you know. And that's important to me, you know.
Is there anything you'd like to add to our listening audience?
Man, give it a shot. Work the steps. It changed my life. I came into Alcoholics Anonymous ragingly agnostic. I had a newcomer's plan. My newcomer's plan was I need to get a better job, I need to get a better car, I need to buy a house, I need to get a her, and I need to get a better credit score. I have all of those things except for the her. The her has been kind of elusive. But none of those things have treated my alcoholism. It turns out this relationship with the God that I didn't want to have is the cornerstone of my life today. And not in some weird kind of what can seem to me off-putting religious sort of way, but just this steadfast assurance that if I stay on the path and keep letting God run things, this God I don't understand and I can't name and I can't describe to you, my life is amazing. It's absolutely amazing. I always joke that I'm overblessed and underpunished, and today that's still true.
Okay, well, let's wrap it up with a little quote from the old preamble. I wish to remind you that whatever is said at this meeting expresses our own individual opinion as of today and as of up to this moment. We do not speak for AA as a whole, and you are free to agree or disagree as you see fit. In fact, it is suggested that you pay no attention to anything which might not be reconciled with what is in the AA Big Book. If you don't have a Big Book, it's time you bought one. Read it, study it, live with it, loan it, scatter it, and then learn from it what it means to be an AA.